The waters between the United States and Cuba have once again become a flashpoint for conflict. This week, a violent incident unfolded just off the Cuban coast, raising serious questions and escalating tensions between the two nations. It began on Wednesday, February 25, 2026, when an American-flagged speedboat entered Cuban territorial waters. The vessel, a 24-foot Proline registered in Florida, was spotted near Cayo Falcones. According to Cuban authorities, their border guards attempted to intercept the boat. What happened next is a matter of intense dispute and investigation. The Cuban government claims the crew of the speedboat opened fire first, wounding one of their commanders. The situation quickly escalated into a deadly exchange. The Cuban forces returned fire, resulting in a tragic outcome for those aboard the American vessel. 4 individuals were killed, and another 6 were wounded in the confrontation. Cuban state media has reported that all individuals on the boat were armed Cuban nationals who reside in the United States. They further allege that many of these individuals had criminal records or a history of violence. The injured were reportedly provided with medical assistance after the clash. This event immediately puts a spotlight on the fragile relationship between the U.S. and Cuba, a relationship historically marked by mistrust and hostility. Adding another layer to this tense story, Cuban officials claimed the group was on a mission with terrorist ends. They reported finding a significant cache of weapons on the boat. This included firearms, Molotov cocktails, bulletproof vests, and camouflage gear. The Cuban government also announced the arrest of a man who had flown into Cuba, allegedly to meet up with the boat. The timing of this incident is also significant. It occurred just one day after the 30th anniversary of a painful historical event, the 1996 downing of 2 planes belonging to the organization Brothers to the Rescue by the Cuban military. Back in the United States, the response has been one of caution and calls for accountability. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed that no American military or Coast Guard units were involved in the incident. He stated that Washington is launching its own investigation and is, for now, relying on the initial reports coming from Cuban authorities. Meanwhile, officials in Florida, including Representative Carlos Gimenez and Attorney General James Othmeyer, are demanding a thorough investigation. Othmeyer went so far as to label the incident a massacre, highlighting the strong emotions and political stakes involved for many Americans, especially in the Cuban-American community. The war in Ukraine continues to grind on, marked this week by destructive attacks and significant military losses. In the Donetsk region, a massive Russian airstrike targeted a critical piece of infrastructure. Russian forces reportedly used a massive 3-ton guided aerial bomb to strike a dam near the village of Osikovo. The sheer power of the explosion was devastating. It caused a breach in the dam, unleashing a torrent of water that flooded the surrounding area. The immediate impact was the disruption of a key logistics route, the Druzhkivka-Kostiantynivka highway, which is vital for supplying Ukrainian forces on the front lines. This attack is seen by military analysts as part of a broader Russian strategy. By targeting infrastructure like dams and roads, Russia aims to put immense pressure on Ukrainian defenses and complicate their ability to move troops and supplies. While the flooding temporarily cut off the main highway, Ukrainian officials have reported that their supply lines remain operational. They are currently using alternative routes to ensure that their soldiers have what they need to continue the fight. This single event shows how the war is not just fought on the battlefield, but also through strategic strikes designed to cripple an opponent's logistical backbone and wear down their resilience. Adding to a difficult week, 2 separate and unrelated incidents involving F-16 fighter jets raised concerns about military aviation safety. Within a single 24-hour period, both Turkey and South Korea lost an F-16 aircraft. In Turkey, a multi-role F-16 jet from the 9th Air Base in Balıkesir crashed. Tragically, the pilot was killed in the incident. The Turkish military has launched an investigation to determine the cause of the crash. On the same day, a South Korean F-16C went down near the city of Yeongju during a night training exercise. Fortunately, in this case, the pilot was able to eject safely and survive the crash. Amidst the ongoing conflict, prominent international voices are weighing in on the path forward. Former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson made a visit to Kyiv, where he made a bold declaration. He stated his belief that the war in Ukraine could potentially end this year, in 2026. However, he attached a major condition to this optimistic outlook. Johnson argued that this outcome is only possible if Western allies significantly increase their military and economic pressure on Moscow. He called for a major expansion of weapons deliveries to Ukraine, tougher sanctions on Russia, and the seizure of frozen Russian assets to help fund Ukraine's defense and reconstruction efforts. While Ukraine fights an external war against Russia, it is also battling an internal enemy: corruption. This week, a significant scandal emerged from within the country's own defense sector. Ukraine's security service announced the detention of two high-ranking officials. An Air Force colonel and a department head were taken into custody in connection with an alleged embezzlement scheme. The case involves a staggering amount of money, with authorities claiming that approximately $35 million was stolen. These funds were specifically allocated for a critical project: the construction of protective shelters at strategic airfields to safeguard valuable military assets from attack. The investigation has uncovered details of how the alleged scheme operated. Investigators believe the officials inflated the costs on contracts for the construction work. They are also looking into allegations of bribery attempts connected to the project. This scandal is a major blow, as it suggests that vital resources meant to protect the country are being siphoned off for personal gain. In response, President Volodymyr Zelensky has publicly announced a new wave of internal reforms. He has promised to intensify the country's anti-corruption measures, signaling that his government is taking the issue seriously and will not tolerate such actions, especially during wartime. On the diplomatic front, hopes for a breakthrough were put on hold. Trilateral talks that were scheduled to take place this week have been postponed. These crucial negotiations were set to involve representatives from Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. The delay pushes any potential progress back, though officials have indicated that the talks are expected to resume in early March. For many, these discussions represent a potential pathway to de-escalate the conflict and find a diplomatic solution. The postponement, while temporary, is a reminder of how difficult and fragile the peace process can be, with countless obstacles along the way. The leaders involved have expressed a mix of hope and caution. President Zelensky stated that he remains hopeful that these discussions could eventually lead to a direct meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He believes that top-level dialogue is essential for making any real progress toward ending the war. However, the Kremlin has tempered these expectations. A spokesperson from Moscow stated that there are currently no immediate plans for a conversation between President Putin and the leadership of the United States. This highlights the significant gap that still exists between the warring sides and the long road that may lie ahead for diplomacy. Beyond the daily headlines of battles and diplomacy, Ukraine is facing a profound and long-term challenge: a rapidly aging population. The war has accelerated a demographic shift that was already underway, leaving the country with one of the oldest populations in the entire world. Current statistics show that approximately 22% of Ukraine's citizens are now over the age of 65. This demographic reality poses significant challenges for the nation's economy, social services, and its future workforce. An older population means a smaller base of working-age people to support a growing number of retirees, creating immense pressure on the pension system and healthcare. In response to these economic pressures and the rising cost of living, the Ukrainian government is making adjustments to its social safety net. Starting on March 1, 2026, pensions across the country are scheduled to increase by around 12%. This move is intended to help retirees cope with inflation and ensure they have a basic level of financial security. The minimum pension amount will be raised as part of this adjustment. However, to manage the costs, the maximum pension cap will remain unchanged, meaning higher-earning retirees will not see a proportionate increase. This balancing act shows the difficult choices the government must make. These stories, from a deadly clash in the Caribbean to a dam explosion in Donetsk, may seem distant, but they are all connected to the stability of our world. The incident near Cuba could easily spiral, affecting international relations and trade routes that many countries depend on. The war in Ukraine directly impacts global food and energy prices, which means people everywhere feel the effects in their wallets. When a country's supply routes are attacked or its infrastructure is destroyed, it creates ripple effects that disrupt the global economy. These are not just foreign stories, they are global events with local consequences. Ultimately, these events matter because they affect ordinary people's lives. The F-16 crashes remind us of the risks military personnel take every day, even in training. The corruption scandal in Ukraine highlights the importance of good governance and how its absence can undermine a nation's ability to defend itself. The postponed peace talks represent a delayed hope for millions of people living in constant fear, and Ukraine's aging population is a story about the deep, lasting scars of war, which will shape a nation for generations to come. Keeping watch on these events helps us understand the interconnected world we all share,